Back tonight on In Focus, your Newzroom Afrika Channel 405 reporting continues. Universities got off to a rocky start this year as students protested at some institutions over challenges with registering, financial exclusion, and some over vaccine mandates. Rising student debt continues to pose a threat to higher education in the country. Here to talk to us about this and more, I'm joined by Dr. Thandi, Lewin, the Acting Deputy Director General for University Education at the Department of Higher Education and Training. To be a part of the conversation tonight, WhatsApp your questions and comments to 072-110-5584, or you can tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405. Dr. Thandi, good evening, and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. Concerns have been raised, particularly if you look at the Durban University of Technology, the burning, I think, of 12 vehicles there, students protesting this question of online registration. Management saying there will be no walk-in registrations at the institution, only online registrations. Are concerns of students being taken into consideration here when policies, for example, like there will be no physical registration on campus are put forward?
Thabo, I'm sorry, I'm struggling to hear you, but I think your question was about the online registration and some of the disruption at DUT this week.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that, look, online registration is becoming the norm. Certainly the last 2 years because of COVID, and particularly last year. 2020 started out as a normal academic year, and then very quickly we had to shut down because of the pandemic. But for 2021, most universities did almost entirely did online registration because for the most part students were not on campus at the beginning of the academic year. This year, obviously, a lot more students are returning to campus, but certainly some institutions have continued with online registration. It works relatively well. Students that are in residences and are close to campus have access to online facilities where they can register in this way. And certainly, I know that at some of the KZN institutions, certainly Durban University of Technology and the University of KwaZulu-Natal have had disruptions on campus and have therefore had to postpone the start of the academic year and to ensure that students are able to register online. So the real issue, I think, is that, the issues that students are raising are very real, and we can talk more about that, and especially in terms of the issues around financing and the cost of higher education, and the struggles that many people do have to pay for their fees and living expenses. But there's absolutely no reason for some of the violence that we've seen. I think what happened yesterday at Indomiso campus of DUT is really, really worrying, and quite a lot of bad damage to the campus. And certainly the university has a responsibility to keep its staff and students safe. And I hope that we won't have much more disruption this year around the campuses.
Yeah. The greater student body, Dr. Lewin, has been vocal around the question of ensuring that there is access for all. Has adequate consideration been taken around this particular issue? And is there an immediate action, shall I say, that has been taken to address this question once and for all? So we do not have the question of there are others who can access internet, others who can't, there are others who stay too far, they can come in person, others can. All these little differences that emerge every time it's time to start the academic year.
Yeah. No, I think that there has been adequate attention to this. All universities have obviously have policies in place around financing, and I'll talk separately about financing. I think this year we are likely to see larger numbers of students returning to campus. At the moment, different universities are taking different approaches, and some are taking more cautious approaches. As you know, some universities are requiring students and staff to be vaccinated if they want to be on campus in face-to-face classes. Currently, there's a big discussion around whether or not all students would be able to return to face-to-face classes and teaching, and there's certainly a very strong desire for that in the system, because if you're a student that started your studies in 2020, it's possible that you might not have been on campus at all. So the kind of experience you've had of learning and teaching is not an easy one. And it hasn't been easy for staff as well. So I think there's an eagerness to get back to campus. Certainly, we are going to have to move towards, more and more people being vaccinated. And our figures show that well above 60% of the student population is vaccinated. There's certainly access from that point of view, I think, is going to become easier. Around issues of finance, I think that's where the big challenges are, and it's the issue that always causes disruption at the beginning of the year. Maybe I can indicate that this year at least we have seen relative calm around the issue of NISPA funding. I think that you will know that we have had shortfalls in the NISPA funding over the last 2 years, but the minister was able to announce on the 1st of February that those issues had been resolved for this year. And the bulk of undergraduate students in the system, just over 60%, are actually funded through the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. So from a finance point of view, access for NISPA students is not generally a problem. The students that really do struggle with debt and struggle then sometimes to register because they have large amounts of debt are students who are self-funded, students who may not have funding through other bursary schemes and scholarships, and who are also not able to get bank loans. Those are the students that we refer to as the missing middle. But it's certainly large numbers of students. And what you will see at this time of year is universities engaged in quite intensive dialogue with student representative councils and one-on-one discussions with students who have debt, and often making arrangements, payment arrangements and acknowledgements of debt for students who are performing well, are close to graduation, for example, and assisting those students wherever they can. So at the moment, we're in that phase of the start of the academic year, and so there have been some disruptions, relatively few, I must say, compared to some of the previous years. Yeah. Last year, of course, was that we did see some very intensive disruption in some areas, but for the most part, students were not on campus. Yeah. And I think certainly there's an anxiety in the sector that students want to get back to class, they want to get back to face-to-face learning, they want to get back into the residences, and we want to try and have a more normal academic year.
Yeah. Are you saying, for example, the situation at DUT is an exception to the rule when it comes to the other institutions where you saw a flood of walk-ins standing at the gate? I mean, of course, they're supported by student bodies there, student movements there. Is that the only scene that we have seen in the country, or are there others who are having a similar question of walk-ins?
So walk-ins have not been a problem over the recent years. I mean, certainly after that tragic incident at UJ some years ago, universities have been moving more and more to online registration. And part of the reason for this is also that there's very high demand for places in universities. And many universities will get sometimes perhaps 10 times the numbers of applicants that they are able to actually admit, that they have the space to admit. And so a number of students, but of course also students will apply to more than one institution and then ultimately make decisions about where they go. But there is certainly very, very high demand for university. And I think that certainly it happened last year at DUT. It seems to have happened again, that through social media posts, there's awareness raised that there might be people might need to walk in, and I know that there was some agitation around this at one or two of the other universities. But for the most part, I mean, walk-in applications have become the norm, and ultimately it's obviously the safest. And the difficulty is that universities, cannot admit all the students that might want to attend university. And we are seeing, and it's a positive thing, we are seeing more and more young people coming out of school with the kinds of passes that they should be able to access university with. But we do have a system that's constrained in terms of the numbers that we can let in. We have to ensure that universities are able to support the students that they take in. that they're able to ensure that those students are properly taught and supported, and that they're able to get through and graduate at the end of the day. And so we are constrained in terms of the resources that we have in the system, the staffing levels that we have, and we work very closely with the universities to ensure that they only enroll within with the capacity that they have to support those students.
Yeah. How are you controlling those numbers? Are you controlling them via the NSFAS applications? How exactly are you ensuring that those numbers don't exceed the capacities of the various institutions?
So, I mean, we have quite a strong a system between the department and the universities. We have what's called an enrollment plan, and we have a 6-year enrollment planning period, and we're currently in the midterm of that. So this year we'll be engaging with every single institution about their 6-year enrollment plans and looking at what some of the trends are, and looking at where growth might be possible and where it needs to be held back. And we'll be, re-looking at that with the universities. But essentially, it's really important because it's the basis for the way in which we fund the public universities. And we can only provide a certain amount of funding, and it's that funding that's critical for universities' core operations through the block grant funding that we provide to institutions. So it's very important that institutions are able to stay within those targets as much as possible. Obviously, institutions, when they are admitting students, will offer more places than they might have available, because students will choose to go to different institutions, and they will not always accept the places that are offered to them. But that is becoming increasingly a challenge, that more and more students are qualifying to get places, and the places aren't available. There has been some sensationalist reporting on this. Ultimately, the best sort of guide of this is to look at how many students are coming out of the schooling system with the national senior certificate marks that will get them into university. And certainly there is a growing gap between the spaces available this year, just under 210,000 first-time entering spaces, and well over 250,000 students who are getting access to bachelor's passes, to university entrance passes. And so that's a challenge. And of course, there are students that may have not gone straight from school into university that are also competing for those places. So I think the pressure is high. I think that youth unemployment has grown, and the demand for higher education, the demand for post-school education is very high. Maybe I should also just mention that the department is working in the long term towards a centralized application service, which would provide a central place where those who want to enter higher education, including TVET colleges as well, community education and skills development opportunities, would be able to apply through a centralized portal. It would be more affordable for most people, but we are still in the piloting phase of that. But at the moment, we have something called the Central Applications Clearinghouse. Those students who have applied to institutions and do not get a place that they have applied for are able to sign up to the catch. It's currently open. It opens just after the matric results come out, and it closes at the end of March. And a number of students do get placed through that. So the institutions will use the catch to access the applications of students who may not have been able to obtain a place elsewhere. And as much as some universities are oversubscribed, we have seen that in some courses at some institutions, they have extended the registration period as they have wanted to fill places in particular courses. So it really depends across the system.
Right, we talk to the questions of funding. Then when we continue next, Dr. Thandi, Lewin, the acting DDG at the Department of Higher Education and Training. Do stay with us. With Dr. Thandi, Lewin, the acting DDG for University Education at the Department of Higher Education and Training. Of course, we're talking challenges in the higher learning institutions. This as students threatening to shut down these institutions, protesting against registration, financial exclusion, as well as the vaccine mandates. We'll get to the vaccine mandates in a moment, Dr. Lewin, but let's talk to what you've already mentioned earlier on. I think the minister also spoke to this. 85% of applicants that you got this year for NSFAS with first-time applicants. There's about 906,000 or so applications that you have received. There was a commitment made by the minister earlier on, I think about 2 or 3 weeks ago, that all students who qualify will be funded, and that there is money to fund them in the various government-funded programs in public universities. Of that 906,000 number, how many of them are you saying will be able to be funded?
So, so thanks. That's a really important question, because applications for NISPA, I mean, really what they show is aspiration for further study. And NISPA last year, according to our current figures, funded just under 800,000 students. That is both in TVET colleges and universities. It's a very big number, and it's a growing number. But obviously, of those students who had applied, not all of those students will qualify. Essentially, you become a NISPA student when you achieve a place to study, and when you are registered to study for a qualification that's a recognized NISPA qualification, and when you are meeting the financial criteria. So those students may qualify financially, but they may not actually end up getting a place in a TVET college or university. So this is a really big issue for us. Of those students, as I've said, we've got about 208,000, just over 208,000 spaces in the university system. So approximately, if we look at trends from previous years, approximately 60% of those students would end up qualifying for NISPA and would be supported. And the important thing about the NISPA budget is that it caters for the continuing students, those students who continue to qualify financially for NISPA and are performing well and continuing with their studies. They receive funding for up to the duration of the course plus 1 year. So those students, it's very important that NISPA is able to meet its commitment to the current students. Given the shortfall that we were concerned about this year, and which we had last year as well, and certainly caused quite a lot of anxiety in the system, we have been able to meet that shortfall. I think obviously the details will be in the budget tomorrow. But what we are really trying to work towards in the long term is a more sustainable, more affordable financial aid ecosystem for higher education. Yeah. And we can't find ourselves in this situation every year. So we have a number of sets of problems in this area. One is that there's a dearth of funding for postgraduate students. The other is that there's groups of students that are unable to get private funding from commercial banks, but who are also not qualifying for NISPA, but whose families still struggle to afford higher education. And those are the students we call the missing middle. But ultimately, we are trying to work out an ecosystem, and it will not, obviously, all the funding will not only come from the state, but we are looking very closely at relationships that might be possible with the commercial banks, and looking at alternative funding sources for students. Yeah. Ultimately, also, we need to get policy stability in the NISPA space, so that we are able to, on an ongoing basis and not on an annual basis, be able to know that we have the kind of budget that's required. But the challenge is, Thabo, that the NISPA budget has grown exponentially over the years, and more students are being supported, and it's an incredibly important part of government's policy to ensure that people who should be in higher education are able to access higher education and are not prevented from doing so on the basis of their financial situation. But it's certainly something that needs to be worked towards. The NISPA budget last year was in the region of 41.5 billion rand, which is a huge amount of money. It almost equals the university subsidy budget, the money that we provide for the universities to operate. And it's a very difficult fiscal situation. As you'll know, the Minister of Finance is going to have a very difficult budget this year, and there are many competing demands on the government on government funds. However, we have seen how this government takes higher education extremely seriously. Yeah. Access to higher education and supporting students to succeed is taken very seriously, and it's something that we hope that we can continue to provide more stable and sustainable and affordable options going forward, so that we're able to continue to support students who should be in higher education.
Yeah.
Thabo, I think the biggest challenge that we also face is that of student debt, and that the economic situation has deteriorated for many families over the past 2 years, and so there are many students that struggle to pay debts. This puts an enormous amount of pressure on the universities, who have to balance budgets and who are in the long term writing off quite a lot of that debt.
Yeah.
And also have a responsibility to remain sustainable and able to pay their staff and continue to do the job that they need to do. So this is also part of the work that we're doing now to try and work towards a more sustainable funding model, both to support students to pay fees as well as to support them to succeed, and of course to make sure that the universities themselves remain sustainable.
That's acting DDG for University Education at the Department of Higher Education and Training.